We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Thursday. I promised Old Soul would be on this week, and normally she would be on right now, but I had to push her back one day. So, Old Soul should be here um, on Friday. Hopefully, I'll talk to Ed, and he'll be here on Saturday. And there was somebody we had on some time ago, a woman by the name of Christy. She had a great time on the show. We had a great time talking to her, and she's coming back too. So maybe Sunday or Monday or however that works out. So we've got some good guests coming your way shortly. And some of the ones that you've been waiting for, Ed and Old Soul, should be coming up very shortly, maybe even starting tomorrow. So that's good news. Always looking forward to talking to them. And Christy, she's been on one time. It was a great show. She did a wonderful job. And I've been telling her she needs to come back. And she finally found some time, and I found a spot that she could do it. And it works out just fine. So we're looking forward to that. We have a few emails to read, so we should probably get to that. We also have a lot of shit that happened. The trial is kind of in a holding pattern. The Manhattan District criminal trial against Donald Trump. They're going to have closing arguments next Tuesday after the holiday weekend, but there's still some things going on that we need to talk about, some interesting shit. So hang on for that. But first, the emails. Hi, Mike. I have an important message for all Republicans out there. Before I do, let me indulge you and the listeners about my name. Now, this is Panzer, and I asked, why the name Panzer? He says, you are absolutely right when you think about a Second World War German tank. In fact, all German tanks in World War II were called Panzers. It's just a generic name for tank in German. That being said, ever since I was a kid, I'm 57 now, so I'm an early Gen X. I have been making plastic model, either planes or armored cars. Suffice to tell you that in that plastic model world, the tank offer was very big. So I made a lot of them, especially German tanks, since they had so many different versions. All right. Also, when I started to play video games in my teens, we would have to pick a made up name to identify our character and so forth. Panzer was, for some reason, the first surname that popped up in my head. So it kind of stuck with me ever since then. Today, I still make models and have traded video games for painting, and it was a no brainer to use the name Panzer as an artist name. So basically, what you have in front of you is an old geek of body only, not that good of a painter who enjoys playing with words and rhetoric. I especially like to laugh and try to make people laugh along with me to stay in a positive vibe in this turmoil time. I have chosen to use second degree rhetoric and sarcasm in my emails in the hope that it may turn around at least one Republican in the right path, since they are mostly impervious to common sense. I have to admit that this was inspired by a Seinfeld episode called The Opposite, where George suddenly starts to do the exact opposite of what he usually would say or do, and everything became a success for him. Finally, I almost passed away 2 years ago, and I had to have urgent surgery. Obviously, I made it, and during my recovery, you became somewhat of an old friend, being there every day with me. That was comforting for me. Thank you very much, Mike. So, back to more important stuff. Here is my important message for all Republicans out there. No sarcasm here. And I think he's being sarcastic when he says that. Unfortunately, Marjorie Taylor Greene has ruined me for blondes. Panzer. Maybe that wasn't sarcasm. I thought he was going to go off on another rant there. Well, Panzer, I appreciate the insight as to who you are, what you are, and why you do the things you do. And I'm sorry that you had a period of time that you were sick, and I'm glad that you found us here, and that we gave some sort of entertainment and or information and or comfort. I'm glad you're better now. I'm glad you're still listening. and it's much appreciated. And as far as making models go, I don't know if that makes you a nerd. I made models when I was a kid. I wasn't a nerd. Fact is, I was pretty fucking cool, actually. Just ask me. But models back in the day, 60s, 70s for me, it was kind of a cool thing to do. You weren't a nerd. Video games, we played some of it. Of course, when I was young, there was only a few types of video games. Remember going to the bowling alley with my mom, and she was in a league, and we'd sit there, and we didn't give a shit about what was going on in bowling. But they did have one video machine, the first video machine, not in the country, the first type of video machine. And that was a game called Pong. Kids would laugh about it now with just basically playing tennis. You had two cursors going back and forth, two handles that you controlled, and another box going back and forth, and you played tennis. Most of you know what I'm talking about. Later on, we did get into some video games. There was some early video games where you could play sports and stuff on TV. There was one type of system that my brother and I had, and we were the envy of everybody because it was probably the best one of its time. In comparison to today, it wouldn't even compare. But back in the day, it was pretty cool, and it was something called Intellivision, and it was very advanced for the time. Like I say, in comparison to today, there is no comparison. So I played some video games later on when we got older and we could go into bars and drink. You played Pac-Man and stuff like that. Um, there was a lot of games. I wasn't big on the video games. I played them, but I wasn't very good at them. I was better at drinking beer, and I was really fucking good at drinking beer. Anyhow, thank you very much for the insight, Panzer. I appreciate it. Next one says, "Hi, Boomer. Let's end speculation. Read two topics. Who will be Trump's VP pick? Number two, will Nikki Haley be more compelled by ambition or conscience?" I think we know that answer, and we'll be talking about it soon. I always like getting two birds stoned at once. So, yeah, Nikki will be the VP pick. She'll easily reconcile her past statements by saying she intends to provide balance to his insanity, and they will openly state that she's there as governor against the worst instincts. They'll joke about it like it's funny. Trump's pitch will be the evil Dems are going to put me in prison, a sacrifice that I'll gladly make for you patriots. Joe Biden won't live another 4 years. He can barely walk now. So this is really an election for the first woman president. Do you want Nikki or Kamala? It won't work, but that's my prediction. We'll know soon enough, and I tend to be right like half the time, so or roughly the same as a random pick generator. Best, Garage Door Jeff. P.S. Ilona and Janice were both fantastic. When you were saying how Trump getting convicted will show people who Trump is, and Ilona said, "How many times do we need to see it, Mike?" I think I literally jumped to my feet in violent agreement. And Janice is a total hoot. Wicked smart, too. I bet if we shared some Virginia homegrown or Southern Virginia moonshine or both and talked about life and Trump, we'd laugh our Virginia asses off. Garage Door Jeff. Yeah, you're probably right. They both did a great job. Um, and Nikki Haley, I think with the news that we saw today, and we'll talk about that soon enough, with the news we saw today, would tell us that she probably is going to be the vice presidential candidate. And as I told you, as far as a choice goes, that's Donald Trump's best choice. He's probably making a mistake, though. He's basing it on what happened in the primaries, where he'd get 80%, she'd get 20%. They're thinking she's popular. And the fact of the matter is, I don't know that she's that popular. I think the people that voted for her were just people that won't vote for Donald Trump. So I don't know getting Nikki Haley in as VP is going to help him much. But what else does he have? He's got nothing fucking else. So we'll see what happens. And in a few minutes, we'll talk about why Jeff and I believe she'll be the VP. And it should be no surprise to anyone. All right, the next one comes from Erwin from Belgium. He says, "Hi, Boomer. Thanks for dropping the extra Not a Podcast. I heard it while biking on my app. That was cool. I hope you keep doing it if it's not too much trouble. All the best, Erwin." Now, I don't know if you've heard this. It depends on where you get the podcast. If you get the podcast on YouTube, you already see the TikTok videos because they're with the podcast video as well. What Erwin suggested is that I compile all the TikToks for the day and put them up as a in audio form, so the people who listen to the podcast in audio can also hear the TikToks, assuming they don't go to TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. So I did that, first of all, to see if I could do it, how hard it would be to do it, and see what the response is. Um, and as I look at, excuse me, as I look at the listenership on that particular show, it looks like a number of people did go to it and listen to it. So that's good. That's excellent. Um, it isn't that hard to do. It is another step that I have during the day. And sometimes, if I've got busy days or if I'm on the road, it may be difficult to do it every day. I'll do my best. But I don't have a problem doing it if some people listen to the audio version of the podcast and don't hear the TikToks. It can't hurt to get more content out there. Like I've always said, I may not be the best content creator. I may not be the smartest, the most handsome, or the most talented, but I got more shit out there than anybody. And that's why I've dubbed myself a content creating motherfucker. I threatened to make a t-shirt like that, but I have a feeling some people might have a problem with that. All right. Thank you, Erwin. I appreciate it. All the way from Belgium. Next one comes from Scott. He says, "Mike, was wondering what you think of diaper licker Nikki Haley endorsing Diaper Donnie. Do you think there will be enough of her votes to help Diaper Donnie? They just can't help themselves. They have to keep sucking the diaper." Scott. Yeah, I don't know that Nikki Haley helps him much. I think that she bowed a knee to Donald Trump. And I think she's got in mind the same thing that all the other people that are vying for the vice presidential candidacy are thinking about. They don't really want to be Donnie's vice president, but they see Donnie in a tough situation, both legally and mentally and physically. They're hoping against hope that something happens to him and they can take the lead. They can climb to the top of the mountain in default to Donald Trump. I really believe that's what they're thinking they're going to do. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right. The next one says, "Well, Boomer, I hope you have some really good news today because we sure could use it with all the stunts that politicians and justices are pulling. It's no wonder that people have doubts about how Trump will end. I'm glad when I hear you say out loud to MAGA that we're not backing down, etc. You have been more vocal in that regard lately, and since most Dems tend to be a little on the complacent side, your influence can be a positive effect. What is your opinion on Ohio taking Biden off the ballot? If they have designated time limit for the submission required to be on the ballot, then why aren't we complying in the first place? Surely we don't expect that MAGA controlled politicians in the state to give us any special treatment. Fat chance. Maybe I just don't understand." I have a feeling something like this happens every year, especially when there's a real adversarial situation between Democrats and Republicans. They had this thing going on in Alabama too. One of them has been resolved. I don't know if it's Ohio or Alabama. I think when it comes down to it by November, this will all be worked out. I can't imagine the Democrats are just going to sleep on this and not do anything about it. I don't think it's a real big thing. I think it's something that probably happens frequently. It always gets worked out. I mean, it would look pretty bad if a state like Ohio or Alabama or any other state didn't have the sitting president on the ballot over and above giving an extra push to their candidate, Donald Trump. It would look pretty silly. and it would be pretty embarrassing. Why don't the Democrats comply and do it within the time frame that that they're allotted? Well, part of it is because those dates generally become or come before the um, convention, and until the convention, that's when he officially becomes the candidate. That should be a given that he's president currently. He's currently in the position, so that shouldn't be a problem. I'll be honest with you, I'm not too worried about that. I'm not too worried about that at all. All right, she goes on to say, what about sequestering the Democrats in Congress from mentioning anything factual about Trump? Isn't that against our constitutional right for free speech? Our representatives tell the truth and lose their rights to speak. MAGA tells a plethora of lies and slander, and no one takes them down. Congressional members are elected by the people to represent them. They're trying to impose a gag order on representatives who are working for the people. A protest is way overdue. Grow a spine, Dems. It's time we stand up for their shenanigans. I don't apologize. Just call me cattle prod. Go down to your local Democratic Party office. Ask what we can do to be proactive if you have to, but don't act like we are helpless. The next one is just that's another story that we're going to talk about. Apparently, a representative talked about Donald Trump, gave completely truthful facts, everything, and that butt hurt the MAGA folks, and they're trying to shut that person down. I don't know the whole story, but we'll talk about it momentarily. The next one is just a question for Old Soul. I would like to know if she has any views on the disgraced preacher John Paul and Micah Miller murder suicide of Micah in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I will warn that his lawyers are publicly threatening to sue anyone saying that he murdered her, how Trump-esque. However, many reports keep revealing more and more questionable evidence. This is a case where the church knew about his grooming of young girls, women, but chose to ignore it. More twists coming. The FBI is now involved. Old Soul has certainly had her share or experiences with the indoctrinated. Some think this is an exception. I'm finding it to be rather the rule in the churches. Thank you both for all you do, Mary. And she says, vote blue, blue wave, straight party ticket, Biden or bust. Well, you know what? Old Soul probably does have some insights on this, not because she deals so frequently with the indoctrinated, but like my wife, she's a big time true crime freak. And I don't think she'd be mad at me for saying that. She'll be on tomorrow. We can talk about that a little bit more, but this is the new hot true crime story. We had the Murdaws in South Carolina. Now we have this here. And this is really kind of sketchy. The guy, the pastor, he does seem very sketchy, and he can complain all he wants about being accused of being a murderer, but all we have to do is sit back and watch. I think he is likely to be indicted, and I don't know much more than anybody else, but when it comes to situations like this, it's almost always the spouse. Um, I'll be surprised if it was some other situation, but the complaints, the arguments, the excuses I hear sound oh so Republican. And we know Republicans typically lie. And this radical right pastor is probably lying too. Now, he can try to sue people to say for saying he's a murderer, but that's more talk than actually doing. You want to sue me? Go ahead. I don't give a fuck. So I will talk to Old Soul about that. She'll no doubt have heard this and she'll bring it up when she's on the program and we can hash that one out. But I think we're in for a long stretch of that story. And I know I'll hear about it from my wife. I know we'll listen to 2020 shows because that's the kind of thing my wife will listen to while we're in the car going off to wherever we're going off to. So I'm there, so I hear all these stories too. And as I've said before, the only troubling thing about those true crime stories is that now I know, for as much as they're listened to by Old Soul, my wife, and other people, these motherfuckers know how to commit a crime and get away with it. That makes me sleep with one eye open on some nights when my wife is not the most pleased with me. But anyway, we will talk about that and we'll see what Old Soul has to say. All right. We brought up Nikki Haley, and on Wednesday, she said that she will be voting for Donald Trump in the general election, a notable show of support given their intense and often personal rivalry during the Republican primary calendar. Now, it's funny, as you pointed out, some of the emailers, um, she really had a distaste for Donald Trump. She couldn't stomach Donald Trump when she was running against him in the primary. But now all of a sudden she says she's going to vote for him. She knows he's a criminal. She knows he's corrupt, but still she's voting for him. Why is she doing that? Well, she wants to be that one person who pulls this thing off. Be the person who can attract normal, relatively normal Republicans and still keep MAGA happy. I don't think it will work. I don't think MAGA likes the fact that she's a woman, that she's of immigrant parents, that she's not technically a white woman. That may be a problem for MAGA. I mean, that's the big problem we have, or Donald Trump has. You have a divided party in two or three parts. If you don't have a unified Republican Party, you can't win any election. And as I said earlier, I personally think Nikki Haley has in mind the very same thing that she had during the primary. She's hoping that something happens to Donald Trump. He keels over, he goes to jail, or for whatever reason, mentally and physically, he just can't run. And then she'll be the heir apparent because she's the next one in line. I think all these vice presidential candidates are hoping against hope that that happens. I don't think any of them want to be the vice president. I mean, look what happened to the last vice president. He had to run for his life because his own constituency wanted to hang the motherfucker. And you think it's going to get any better if Donald Trump becomes president? Well, more importantly, whoever is his vice president shouldn't get their hopes up because Donald Trump cannot win the November election. He just cannot win, whether he's got Nikki Haley or anybody else as vice president. It's not going to be enough and it's not going to help. People, the one most negative thing that Donald Trump has in the upcoming election is that he has people terrified that he'd overturn democracy. He'd cause incredible more damage in this country than he already has, and that the future for our kids and our grandkids does not look good with Donald Trump as president of the United States. Now, Haley also made it clear that she feels Trump has work to do to win over voters who supported her during the course of the primary campaign and continuing to cast votes for her in ongoing primary contest. I will be voting for Trump, Haley, Trump's former UN ambassador, said during an event at the Hudson Institute in Washington. Biden has been catastrophic, so I will be voting for Trump. I keep hearing that. Biden has been catastrophic. I'd like to ask these folks specifically how. What has he done that's catastrophic? The border's open? Well, it's not open. And he tried to do something. It was you, the Republicans, that kept it less guarded. Say that. Economy? Well, the economy is booming. Jobs? Biden got more jobs by a ton than Donald Trump got. They say these things. They know better, but this is all they have is they'll make shit up and hope against hope that somebody believes it and they might get elected into office. Donald Trump doesn't have a chance to be elected into office. He will be a convicted felon before he is president ever again. And that might stall his future in terms of becoming president because a convicted felon, has a different perception, even by the people that support him. They have to consider it because it's real. It's not a hoax. It's not fake. And Donald Trump cannot divert from it. We will know when he's a convicted felon. And then it's going to be interesting to see how Republicans and MAGA reacts to it. More importantly, I'm interested to see how Donald Trump reacts to it because this is going to be troublesome. I've told you the last thing he wants to do is be embarrassed. And even when he's been embarrassed in the past, he's always been able to divert, distract, lie about it, say it's a hoax, say it's fake news. But he won't be able to do that in this case. The verdict will come down from the jury, it will be published, and there won't be any question as to what exactly happened. He might grouse about it. Well, they shouldn't have convicted me, but nonetheless, they did convict him. So this is going to be a big problem for Donald Trump and the Republicans. If Donald Trump does drop out of the race, it'll be interesting to see what the remaining candidates say. They still want to wrap up Donald Trump's voters, even though they're dwindling. They don't want to miss out on them because they know one thing that Donald Trump doesn't know, and it's something I said earlier. Unless a Republican candidate has the party unified, they cannot win. There's not enough Republicans to win the election if they aren't unified and if they don't have independent voters. And neither is the case. They don't have independent voters. Women all over this country have pretty much spit on Donald Trump because of him being proud of taking away their constitutional rights. Haley went on to say, having said that, I stand by what I said in my suspension speech. Trump would be smart to reach out to the millions of people who voted for me and continue to support me and not assume that they're just going to be with him. And I genuinely hope he does that. Yeah, I don't know if he will. I mean, he told these same folks, we don't need your help. We don't need your money. We don't need your votes because he was mad that Nikki Haley wouldn't endorse him and that they had the audacity to vote for her. But again, I don't know that they were voting for her. She's not that good a candidate. I think they were more voting against Donald Trump, and they would vote against anybody else that stood up next to Donald Trump. Any other Republican would be better than Donald Trump at this point. Now, the comments in her first public speech since leaving the race are another signal of the GOP's virtually complete consolidation of support behind Trump, even from those who have labeled him a threat in the past. They don't really have much choice, and I've talked about this before. I think they know in their heart of hearts that Donald Trump does not have a prayer. He's not going to win re-election in November. It's just not possible. The path isn't there. However, it's important for them to maintain him as a nominee because these Trumplafucks, these cultists, if Donald Trump isn't the candidate, they won't vote. And if they don't vote, that spells trouble for the down ballot candidates, the members of the House, the Senate, state legislatures, state governors. If the MAGA folks just stay home, that will affect all of their races negatively. And even if the Republicans like Mitch McConnell or whoever, Mike Johnson, know that Donald Trump can't win, they still have to hold on to Donald Trump for the sake of the down ballot shit. Now, you remember going back just a month or two, Haley shuttered her own bid for the GOP nomination 2 months ago, but did not immediately endorse Trump, having accused him of causing chaos and disregarding the importance of U.S. alliances abroad, as well as questioning whether Trump 77 was too old to be president again. But yesterday, she endorses him. This is the thing about Republicans. They have zero integrity, no integrity. It's not about what's right. It's not about what's best for the country or the people in the country. It's what's best for them. What's going to get them the most votes and give them the power they so desire. But it's not working. It's just not working. Now, Trump in turn repeatedly mocked her with the nickname Bird Brain, though he curtailed those attacks after securing enough delegates in March to become the presumptive Republican nominee. Trump's campaign did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Haley's announcement, President Joe Biden's campaign, meanwhile, has been working to win over her supporters, whom they view as true swing voters. Biden's team is quietly organizing a Republicans for Biden group, which will eventually include dedicated staff and focus on the hundreds of thousands of Haley voters in each battleground state, according to people familiar with the plans, but not authorized to discuss them publicly. Now, despite Haley's announcement Wednesday, the Biden campaign made it clear they would continue to court voters who backed her in the Republican primaries. Nothing has changed for the millions of the Republican voters who continue to cast their ballots against Donald Trump in the primaries and care deeply about the future of our democracy, standing strong with our allies against foreign adversaries and working across the aisle to get things done for the American people while also rejecting the chaos, division, and violence that Donald Trump embodies. Now, Michael Tyler, the campaign's communication director, said in a statement, only one candidate shares those values, and only one campaign is working hard every day to earn their support. And that's President Biden's. Meanwhile, Haley made several criticisms of Biden's foreign policy and handling of the U.S. Mexico border in her speech Wednesday at the Hudson Institute. Yeah, that's all well and good, Haley, but y'all had an opportunity to pass a bipartisan bill in the Senate, a bill that gave the Republicans virtually everything they wanted. But still, because Donald Trump said so, they voted against it, and we don't have that bipartisan bill. I think they may be looking at taking another run at it, but at this point, that bill is dead. How dare you blame Joe Biden when he's done everything to try to do something about the border, including the bipartisan bill, and you blocked it. When I say you, I mean Republicans in general, and that means you too, Nikki Haley. You don't care about the border. You don't care about the people on the border. All you care about is finding dirt on Joe Biden, so hoping against hope that you might win the election in November. Got news for you, Nikki. You're not going to win, whether you're VP candidate or not. You're not going to win. And Donald Trump will not drop out unless he has absolutely no choice. He won't do it for the good of the party or the good of the country. He will only do it if he can't continue. And I don't know what's going to happen there. I personally think these convictions are going to weigh heavy on his mind and cause some problems with an already fragile mind, but we don't know that for sure. As I've said, I hope he is the candidate because that's the best option for the Democrats. But Nikki Haley coming into the mix, I don't think that's a big deal. I don't think that's going to have any impact. Well, it'll have a little bit of an impact, but it's not going to be enough. I think Joe Biden wins in November by a shitload. We'll wait and see what happens. All right, we will take a quick break and we will be right back. Well, we heard about the story, the problems for Supreme Court Justice Alito. Apparently, it was found out that he was flying an upside down flag on his property of his home 11 days after the attack on the Capitol, the insurrection, if you will. And an upside down flag represents the Stop the Steal movement, which is, in essence, the people who attacked the Capitol. Needless to say, he's getting some shit for it. Now, I know the Supreme Court and other politicians think, oh, this will just wear off, this will just fade away. But that's not the case for Judge Alito. He's still getting hit pretty hard over this shit, and it's not going to go away. It may be the very thing that breaks the camel's back. And if that weren't enough, apparently there is a second flag carried by rioters during the January 6th, 2021 attack at the U.S. Capitol, and it was displayed outside his home, owned outside by another home owned by Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito, according to a shocking report in the New York Times. The newspaper published photos from neighbors and from Google Street View that show an appeal to heaven flag flying outside the justice's beach house in Long Beach Island, New Jersey. Yeah, it's just his wife though. It's not him. The flag featuring a green pine tree on a white background dates to the Revolutionary War, but is now linked with Christian nationalists and those who support former President Donald Trump. House Speaker Mike Johnson displayed in his office last year after he was elected to the post of Speaker of the House. Now, Google Maps image taken in August of 2023 shows the Appeal to Heaven flag flying outside a beach home the Times identified as Alito's. The Supreme Court did not immediately reply to the request for comment. The latest report comes after a New York Times investigation found the upside down American flag that was flown on January 17th, 2021, in his, I think it was his DC home. That was just a week, just over a week after the January 6th riot at the Capitol. And as the nation's high court was hearing cases about the integrity of the 2020 presidential election. If there was anybody that should recuse himself, it would have been Alito. But guess what? He did not. Now, Alito issued a brief statement about the upside down flag, saying he was not responsible for its display outside his home and that it linked to a dispute his wife was having with neighbors at the time. The excuses that he's going to use next are the sun got in my eyes and the dog ate it. Yeah, good excuse. He went on to say, I have no involvement whatsoever in the flying of the flag, he told the Times. Well, other than it was in your yard that you saw every time you came home from work. It was planted by your wife, who you presumably talked to now and again. And if you pulled into the driveway and saw that flag and disagreed with it, I have to think that you would have had a conversation with your wife. And if you did have a conversation with your wife, well, then it sounds like you agreed with posting that flag, which is interesting because he's alleged to be a smart man, a lawyer, a judge, a justice of the Supreme Court. And not even he was smart enough to understand this could be a bad look for him. And he just let it fly. And now we're hearing about a second one that he's allowing to fly. Judge Alito is a corrupt motherfucker. He is an insurrection in his own right. All his actions have suggested that. He's as much as come out and said, yep, I'm an insurrectionist. He said the first flag was briefly placed by Mrs. Alito in response to a neighbor's use of objectionable and personally insulting language on yard signs. Of course, my wife did it, but it's okay because they were picking on her first. Notice who's the victim. The dual flag reports have prompted many Democrats to call on Alito to recuse himself from cases involving the January 6th attack, with some House members saying the symbols create, at minimum, the appearance of improper political bias. Even Senator Lindsey Graham said the decision to fly the upside down flag did not display good judgment. Really? You think? You think that wasn't good judgment? There are currently 2 cases pending before the court related to the January 6th incident, including Trump's claim he is immune to all prosecution linked to his duties while in the White House. Yeah, we've got real problems on the Supreme Court, problems that we need to fix as soon as possible. But nothing is going to happen until such time that we get past the election and the Democrats take control of the House, maintain control of the Senate, and Joe Biden has a mind to do something about it. There was a time that Joe Biden said he wasn't for expanding the court, the Supreme Court, if you will. That doesn't mean he's going to stick to that, because once he gets past this election and he is currently the president, he's a lame duck president. He's going to be more susceptible to encouragement and leverage used by the far left politicians and even some of the more centrist politicians. We've got a real problem with Judge Alito and Clarence Thomas. We've got smaller problems with three of the others, Republican or conservative Chief Justice or Supreme Court justices, including the Chief Justice, John Roberts. So I do think something will come of it. I just don't know if there's anything that can be done prior to the election. All right. This one is particularly disturbing to me because it tells me just how criminal and how corrupt Donald Trump is. And it also tells me there's a certain amount of ineptitude with the FBI. A newly released grand jury transcripts show Donald Trump's attorneys in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case refused to answer questions about his client during a contentious exchange. Timothy Palatorre, who quit the case shortly after Trump was indicted last year, accused a Department of Justice lawyer of not following the rules on attorney-client privilege, setting off a tense dialogue shown in court records unsealed by federal judge Aileen Cannon and reported by Newsweek. Are we really doing this? Parlatori said, and another DOJ lawyer interrupted and reminded Trump's attorney that he was a witness and shouldn't be asking questions. The grand jury ultimately handed up an indictment against Trump on 40 federal charges related to his mishandling of sensitive government documents stashed at his private resort in Palm Beach. And that was right after leaving the White House in January of 2021. And Parlatori testified before grand jurors December 22nd, 2022, at a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you've ever seen this guy on the air. He left Donald Trump. Sometimes he'll talk out against Donald Trump, but he's a sycophant. He's a Trump-la-fuck. I just don't like the look of him when I see him talking on the news shows. What he says is absolutely ridiculous, and clearly he's biased toward Donald Trump. He didn't quit Donald Trump and then somehow get an epiphany that Donald Trump is who he really is. This guy still buys into it. This guy still believes it. He's got a dog in the race, so he's going to stand by Donald Trump until he can't anymore. And that's going to be bad news for him because when Donald Trump does fall off the table, these people are going to be left with embarrassment and stink on them that they will never, ever get rid of. Now, Palatori said it's privilege, which is something that she knows. If it's something that every attorney does know, Palatori told federal prosecutors. DOJ lawyer Julie Edelstein, Brett Reynolds, and Ann McNamara questioned Parlatori, asking the attorney why Trump had not allowed him to discuss their conversations if he was cooperating with the investigation. The question you just asked seems to indicate that for somebody to be cooperative, they would waive their attorney-client privilege, which is absolutely wrong, Palatori said, after objecting to the line of questioning. Edelstein told him that she was not asking him to waive attorney-client privilege, but said she was obligated to ask about her discussions on the matter. Do you understand that's not something that should be even suggested? Palatori said. Reynolds intervenes and reminded Palatori he was the witness, and Edelstein steps in and adds that she has asked him a question, which Palatori again says improper, but she explains her obligation. You made a representation to this grand jury about what was said at the meeting, Edelstein said, and I ask you the basis of that representation. This guy is really a non-factor. The only reason he's on TV is because he had a connection to Donald Trump at one point or another, and that helps him look better in this whole situation. But what was interesting about this whole conversation was that it was precipitated by something that was found out, that was revealed when they published these previously sealed documents. Now, in this document one of the things that we found out was that some 4 months after Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home had been searched by the FBI, 4 months later, Donald Trump's lawyers found more classified documents in Donald Trump's bedroom, in his fucking bedroom. And he just keeps saying, I don't know how they got there. I wasn't going to do anything with them. Yeah, absolutely, Donnie, you're a piece of shit. This could even constitute a new charge because this is separate from what's down in Florida that's already been indicted for. This could create another charge, and that would be interesting if that happened. Because if they did set up a new charge, a new trial, then there would be the lottery for the judge, and chances are you wouldn't get Aileen Cannon the second time around. It'd be interesting to see how that case proceeded with a normal judge. All right, Donald Trump's valet, Walt Nada, went to court for a hearing Wednesday alleging he was being unfairly persecuted by the Justice Department in the classified documents case before Judge Aileen Cannon. Of course, once again, you are the victim. We're so, so sorry that you are a fucking victim. Now, speaking to MSNBC host Nicole Wallace, Brandon Van Grack, a former national security official for the Justice Department, said that Nada's own lawyer confessed their complaints weren't even valid. Now, Donald Trump has worked to delay the case in which he's changed or charged under the Espionage Act, while Trump continues to claim he is the victim of vindictive prosecution and a political witch hunt, not a motion to dismiss the charges against him because of this. The quote goes on to say, what you see is extensive hearing after hearing after hearing on various motions, including the ones today on selective and vindictive prosecutions, he said. Even though that opinion that you just read showed sort of how not vindictive and selective, but how targeted and justified the conduct was. Now, Van Grack explained that the hearing revealed an acknowledgement that there was no evidence that the DOJ was vindictive toward the defendant. Yeah, that's going to work just as well as all the other motherfuckers work. Now, most of the time, judges use paper filings to make decisions on issues like that. Cannon did not. And by not doing so, she added to the trial's delay, and she did it knowingly. But instead, there was a hearing, not even combined with other issues, a hearing specifically on this point, which just shows, I think, further evidence that this court really finds something very sympathetic about these arguments made, even if there doesn't seem to be evidence to support them. Wallace compared Judge Cannon to the Washington, D.C. Judge Beryl Howell, who ruled that Trump's lawyer could be questioned about the classified documents because attorney-client privilege was breached as it was in furtherance of a crime. See, that's the thing. You can demand attorney-client privilege, but if it's while in the process of committing a crime, that doesn't hold water anymore. Howell who was presided over many cases involving classified materials. Cannon reportedly has none under her belt. Part of this is to underscore your point. There is overwhelming evidence that classified information was stored at Mar-a-Lago where it was not allowed to be and was not produced to the government. What was released or unsealed, I should say, just furthers that. As Carol Lenig said, it's not new and the judge has seen it before. That's really one of the tough things about this situation. Now we find out there are more classified documents in Donald Trump's bedroom that the FBI did not find. My question is, why did the FBI not find it? Did they not do a good enough job? Did Donald Trump have them out of the building for a time and then brought them back? Did he hide them? Well, he's been proven to hiding documents in this whole process. Remember, we saw the videotape of the security cameras. And that is why Walt Nada is on the hook, because he was one of the fucks that was actually moving them. I know a lot of people are frustrated about what's going on down in Florida. They see the delays and the ineptitude of Judge Aileen Cannon. All I can tell you is for me, I focus on what's in front of me, what's imminent, and that is the Manhattan District trial. I'm watching it closely because I want to see when there is convictions in that trial. And make no mistake, there will be convictions. Once that is done, then we can start looking at Florida or DC or Georgia and start focusing on those areas. We got to get the wins, we got to get the convictions, and then move on to the next thing. If we try to make this all one big deal with all four cases and trying to get it in before the election, that's not going to work. It's just not going to work at all. So we'll keep an eye out for you on that. I don't foresee any major movement out of that case anytime soon, and they may very well try to push it out past the election, which at this point in time, as I've said before, doesn't bother me as much as it once did. Like I say, this Manhattan District case is going to be over maybe as quickly as next week. Donald Trump may be a convicted felon as early as next week. That's going to be enough to do some severe damage to Donald Trump, his own psyche, and to his support. So let's get that one done. Let's get the convictions. Then we'll focus on the other ones. But as I've said many times before, even if the other three come after the election, I'm okay with that. The Manhattan District is enough. All the other cases will run their course. He will go on trial. He's not getting out of that shit. And when he does, he'll be in a much different situation, a much more vulnerable situation. He won't be running for the presidency. He won't be the president. He'll just be some dumb shit citizen that fucked up big time. And the Republicans, they will cease to support him after they get embarrassed and devastated in the November election. So she can delay all she wants, but frankly, in my personal opinion, Aileen Cannon is doing Donald Trump no favors. This is going to be more harmful to him in the end. And I know the delays, everybody hates the delays, but if it's something we have to deal with, we just deal with it. Then we look down deeper as to what the argument is, and we find out there is no argument. So we know what's going to happen to Donald Trump, whether it happens tomorrow or it happens a year from now. I don't particularly care as long as the Manhattan District case finishes up when expected next week. Now, former Trump payroll attorney William Brennan called former President Donald Trump's reported insistence that Bob Costello take the stand a disaster for Donald Trump. We talked about that. Michael Cohen was cross-examined by Donald Trump's legal team, the defense, and they made some connections in terms of hits on Michael Cohen. That may have been one of their best days. It wasn't enough to win the case, but it was something they had. Now, they got all cocky and they decided they'd put on their own case and they'd call their own witness. And that's what they did. They called Robert Costello, who is a lawyer that claimed to be Michael Cohen's lawyer. It turns out he wasn't his lawyer at all. And the reason he never ended up being Michael Cohen's lawyer is because Michael Cohen thought him suspicious, that somehow he was tied to Donald Trump. Turns out Michael Cohen was right. And we know this because of the emails that were exposed in court just the other day. Robert Costello was there to try to burn down Michael Cohen and whatever he's testifying to, but all he did is burn down himself and the defense team. They looked absolutely foolish. This guy was exposed for who he is, and he was a buffoon. Not to mention the fact that he pissed off the judge, and the judge cleared the court, pretty much admonished him and said, listen, if you don't fucking cut this shit out, you'll be sharing a jail cell with Donald Trump. Now, Brennan served as Trump's lawyer for his payroll corporation in a tax fraud trial, and Trump himself in his second impeachment trial. He appeared on CNN's Tuesday morning to discuss the ongoing hush money election interference trial of Donald Trump's. Now, Costello served as Michael Cohen's attorney before Cohen found other legal counsel and was the source of fireworks during Monday's trial. One correction to that, as I understand it, Michael Cohen never signed on with this lawyer. The lawyer was pitching him on using him as Michael Cohen's lawyer, and Michael Cohen, as I said, felt something was fishy that was going on. And the fact of the matter is, he was right. Judge Juan Marchand cleared the courtroom to personally rebuke Costello's behavior on the stand, and the juror, while they were cleared out, they saw there was some kind of turmoil between the witness and the judge, and that doesn't typically play too well. So having Costello on the stand was absolutely a fucking bad mistake. And it's not something they're going to be able to divert, distract, or delay to work it in their favor. They can't do it. They don't have the time, they don't have the resources, and they don't have the witnesses. Now, Brennan opened by agreeing with Ellie Honig's assessment that Costello's testimony backfired for the defense, saying it was a huge, huge step backward for the defense. Dana Bash addressed Brennan, saying, "You are the only one here who has actually been in Trump world and been, well, kind of a part of that dynamic when people are trying to please the defendant. Do you think that part of what he did was that he's not obviously his lawyer right now, but he's obviously been very involved with Trump's confidants? You think that was it?" Jake Tapper interrupted to joke Attorney General Bob Costello, after which Brennan said, "Bite my tongue with the in Trump world thing. He's a guy I represented." The lawyers have to run the show, Brennan said about reports that Trump insisted his lawyers put Costello on the stand. The client, I don't care if the client is the former president of the United States, the lawyers have the client talk about pleading guilty and pleading not guilty, testifying or not testifying. That's fine. And maybe some input on waiver trial versus jury trial. That's all. I mean, this was a disaster yesterday because we're talking about this guy, Brennan concluded. And as I've said so many times before, um, Donald Trump is dictating how these lawyers will behave and what they will do. And he thought that having Costello on the stand long and exposing Michael Cohen for whatever lies everybody already knew he committed, he thought that would be good for the case. That was Donald Trump's decision, not the lawyers. I have a feeling that the lawyers probably would have pushed back and said, "Yeah, now we're not going to put him on stage. That opens up too much shit." I mean, keep in mind these emails that suggest that Costello was in cahoots with Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. It was all right there in the emails. The defense team knew exactly what the prosecution had and what they were likely to do. But they couldn't convince Donald Trump to do the right thing, the smart thing. They just bent over and took it in the ass and did whatever Donald Trump suggested. Well, it didn't work. The next thing from Trump's camp is going to be Donald Trump blaming the lawyers for not doing their job. They did everything that Donald Trump suggested, but he's losing, and it couldn't be that he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. All right, Representative Jim McGovern had part of his floor speech stricken from the record on Wednesday after he detailed some of former President Donald Trump's recent legal troubles. "We have a presumptive nominee for president facing 88 felony counts, and we're being prevented from even acknowledging it," said McGovern at one point during a debate on a procedure rule, adding, "These are not alternative facts, these are the real facts." And apparently, Republicans had trouble with hearing the real facts. The top Democrat on the Rules Committee continued, "A candidate for President of the United States is on trial for sending hush money payments to a porn star to avoid a sex scandal during the 2016 campaign and then fraudulently disguising those payments in violation of the law. He's also charged with conspiring to overturn the election. He also was charged with stealing classified information and a jury has already found him liable for rape in a civil court. And yet, in this Republican controlled House, it's okay to talk about the trial, but you have to call it a sham. Representative Aaron Houchin called multiple times for McGovern's word to be taken down as he spoke. McGovern finally suspended after Representative Jerry Carl of Alabama, who was presiding over the House, insisted he stop. Now, Houchin said, "Mr. Speaker, I demand that his words be taken down." The House clerk then read back McGovern's comments, and Carl ruled on Houchin's motion. Although remarks in debate may include criticism of such candidates' official position as a candidate, it is a breach of order to refer to the candidate in terms of personally offensive, whether by actually accusing or by merely insulting, Carl said. Well, that's interesting. When Marjorie Taylor Greene made fun of Representative Jessica Crockett, when she made sent out an insult to Jessica Crockett, they wouldn't take that down. Again, it goes back to Republican integrity. There isn't much out there. It's all pretty much bullshit. It's whatever we can get for ourselves, but not for the other side. What did Janice? What did Janice say? It's okay for me, but not for thee. That's exactly the attitude of the Republican Party. Now, although remarks in the debate may include criticism of such candidates' official position as a candidate, criticism, I would say criticizing, did I say Jessica? I meant Jasmine Crockett, of her long eyelashes or fake eyelashes. That seems to fall in line with the rule, but they were very resistant to deleting that from the record. In fact, they didn't delete it from the record. The acquisition that the president has committed a crime, even that the president has done something illegal, is not in order, Carl concluded. Well, if it's not in order, what the fuck is? They went on to say, "Mr. Speaker, is it correct that members of Congress can mention the trial of the presumptive nominee for president, call it a sham, and question the integrity of the judge, but a reference to the mere existence of that same trial without any characterization? That's out of order." McGovern hit back in an inquiry to which Carl refused to offer an advisory opinion. I've said it before, I'll say it again. We want this fixed. We want to straighten this shit out. But the only way we're going to do that is by everybody getting out and voting in November and voting Democrat and voting against any and all Republicans. You really must do that. Because if we give the Republicans any sense of power in the House or the Senate, we're in for a long fucking 4 years, or at least 2 years. And a lot of stuff that could get done won't get done because they are obstructionist motherfuckers. They will lie, cheat, and steal. That's been proven to us. We need to acknowledge that and do something about it. This taking the high road has not worked, so we need them to do something to stop this ridiculousness in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, for that matter. We need to do something. But first, we need to win the elections in November, and then we'll have the power and the leverage to do what we need to do. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again soon.